This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HassidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. Once there was a group of schleppers who wandered around from city to city begging for food. But they were so dirty, disgusting, they smelled, their clothes were torn, and when people would look at them, they would just turn away. This gang of schleppers, they were lucky if they got some stale bread. And they were grown men, and they hardly had anything to eat. They were always hungry, almost starving. One day they were sitting together in silence for a few minutes, and one of them says to the others, "Listen, the only people who are always welcome in a new town are the great Rebbes and their Chassidim. Everybody fights over them to invite them for a meal. So I have a great idea. Maybe you," and he points to the leader of the schleppers, "you can pretend to be a holy master and we'll pose as your students." And the leader, he thinks about it and he smiles and he says, "You know what? If we go and clean ourselves up a little bit, it just might work." And since none of them could think of a better idea, they decided to give it a try. They even made up a name for themselves. Their leader would be called the Trich'er Rebbe. And of course, they would be the Trich'er Chassidim. And as the beggars came close to the next town, they sat down and planned their grand entrance. They decided that first they had to go to the nearby river and wash themselves and clean their clothes. And then two of them would go ahead into the next town and announce the approach of the famous Trich'er Rebbe. And the rest would come following with their holy master. So these beggars show up in town and announce that the great Rebbe is coming. And even though he was an unknown Rebbe, everybody knew that if the Rebbe was coming, they wanted to come out and greet him. And just as the beggar had predicted, everyone competed for the honor of inviting the Chassidim and their Rebbe for a meal. Finally, the beggar Chassidim went home with one of the richest Jews in the city, who fed them his best food and offered them the best wines. He treated them like they were royalty. And for these starving beggars, this was the answer to all their prayers. After the meal, the rich man turns to the Rebbe, the fake Rebbe, and he says to him, "Holy Master, I have to tell you the truth. There's a reason why I invited you to my house today. My wife and I have a baby daughter, and she's very sick. The doctors have said that she might die, and there's nothing they can do. So Rebbe, I've heard that holy people like you can do miracles. So I'm begging you, Rebbe, please, you have to help me. Save my child." The beggar Chassidim turned white. The Rebbe, he buried his head in his hands in despair. Such a great idea, but it went totally wrong. What? They couldn't shout out, "Don't you know who we are? We're just nothing. We're a bunch of beggars pretending to be Chassidim with a pretend Rebbe because we're so desperate for food. We can't do anything for you." But of course they couldn't say that. How could they admit that they were imposters? The townspeople would stone them to death. So the Chassidim were silent, and they looked at their fake Rebbe, and he nodded slightly, and then followed the rich man into the baby's room. He took out a book of Psalms, sat down by the baby's bed, and asked that the door be closed, and he be left alone. The so-called Rebbe stayed in the room for about an hour, and when he came out his eyes were red and swollen, and his face looked gray and tired. But he smiled at the rich man, and he said, "Baruch Hashem, your daughter is out of danger. Not only will she live, but she'll be very strong and healthy for the rest of her life." The rich man had to see the miracle for himself. He jumped up and rushed into the baby's room. All the Chassidim, so-called Chassidim, followed closely behind to see what's going on. And when the father saw that the child really looked so much healthier than before the so-called Rebbe went into the room, he started weeping with joy. But for the beggars, it was a whole different situation. They started talking with one another, whispering, "What's going on here? How can our leader have possibly cured this girl? We've known him for so many years, and we thought he was just a schlepper like the rest of us. Could it really be that he was a holy tzaddik, and he could do miracles, but he was hiding his power from us all the time?" The beggars managed to keep their mouths shut, until the grateful wealthy man thanked the so-called Rebbe for his help. The Chassidim thanked him for the meal, the wealthy man gave them some money, and walked them out to the road. And then, when the wealthy man had gone back into his house, the so-called Chassidim grabbed their leader and they shook him, and they shouted at him, and they said, "You've got to tell us the truth. Are you a beggar, or are you a Rebbe? Because if you're a Rebbe, and you could heal that girl, and you could do miracles, how come you let us starve for all these years, and you didn't help us?" The leader looked at them sadly, and he said, "I'm sorry, my friends. I'm no Rebbe. I've always been what I look like, a poor schlepper like the rest of you. But when I went into that child's room, and I saw that beautiful girl, and felt the strength of her father's love, I felt so helpless I thought I would die. All I wanted in the world was to be able to help her, and I knew there was nothing I could do. So I started to pray, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, I know I'm nothing. I'm just a poor beggar. And not only that, I'm even a liar, a cheat, an imposter. And this man put his faith in me to save his child's life. But the truth is, Hashem, the rich man only thinks that he's depending on me because he thinks I'm a powerful holy Rebbe. But really, he's looking for you. You're the one that he needs. The only one that can perform a miracle and heal this child. Because you're everything, Hashem. The problem is he doesn't know how to find you, Hashem. So he asked me, a lying, worthless beggar, to be his messenger. So I'm begging you, Hashem. And believe me, Hashem, I know how to beg. If there's anything I know how to do in life, it's beg. So I'm begging you on behalf of this wealthy man and the trust he put in me, even though I'm not worthy. Please don't punish him because of me. I'm a liar, but he's a good and loving father. Please heal his daughter. And the leader of the beggars, he turns to everyone and he says, so you see, Hashem had compassion and he saved the child. But it's not because I'm a Rebbe, and it's not because I can do miracles. It's just because I offered Hashem a sincere prayer from the deepest place in my heart, and Hashem answered my prayers. La, 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 la.